Thank you very much. So we start the second day of the Gaidar Forum. This is an important event, and we would like to focus not on the events of yesterday, but about a digital revolution that is taking place in many fields. Everybody wants to learn, everybody wants to teach, and everybody wants to make money doing that. Can you hear me now? Let me introduce the panelists that we have today. Mikhail Kotikov is the acting Minister of Science and Higher Education of Russian Federation. Dmitry Peskov is Special Presidential Representative on Digital Development Agenda. Yaroslav Kuzminov is the President of Higher School of Economics. Ben Nelson, the founder and CEO of Minerva. And Annie Omaya is the Chief Experience Officer at English First. Let me first ask a question to Mr. Nelson. Minerva was organized to provide university-level education through new technologies. Are you a modern university?
In many ways, we think we are. But I think the realization of the need for a form of higher education goes beyond technology. I think yesterday, President Putin, in his address to the nation, talked about the need for connecting rural Russia with bandwidth such that citizens in rural Russia will be able to get the same kind of education as in Moscow or in St. Petersburg. But what I would argue is that that may not be ambitious enough, because that assumes that the educational system that we have today is sufficient. And in many ways, none of us is comfortable. None of us is accepting of having the same solution for almost anything that we do today that existed 10 years ago, 30 years ago, let alone 300 or 500 years ago. But universities are essentially the same. And technology shouldn't be an enabler to have the same type of education brought to different places. It should be an enabler to rethink what education is possible. In many ways, like it's affected all of our lives. Just coming in here, one of my colleagues, Dmitry, has on stage here showed me how he can pay his taxes in 20 seconds on an app. Now, if you were to think about technology as an enabler in the same way to pay taxes in the old way, well, what would technology be? It would be a place for you to fill out all of the forms rather than with handwriting and typing. That doesn't help anybody. That doesn't change the way that you interface with the services that you need. Technology is best used when you can reimagine what an experience should be. And in education, it is the same. Education, when it is delivered without technology, without data, is in many ways doomed to be delivered in context, in subject matter. This is why so much of education is centered on academic departments and disciplines. But the reality is that the education that we all need isn't based on a particular field. So I'll ask you a quick question. How many of you here in this room have been in the working world for more than 10 years? This is the point where you raise your hands. I know there's more of you that have been working for more than 10 years. Keep your hands raised. Raise them high. How many here have worked for more than 10 years? Okay, now keep them up. Now, for all of you who have your hands up, keep them up, keep them up, keep them up. How many of you are doing the same job in the same field today that you did at the very beginning of your career? All right. I would say maybe 15%, 20%. right? And that's the reality of today's world. In today's world, we have to transfer the practical knowledge that we have to go about our day-to-day from one field to another. That's the nature of our careers. We have to actually participate in the world that we live in. We have to not just be professionals, but we have to be citizens. We interact in different ways. And the role of education should be to give us the tools to be successful in any pursuit that we decide to follow. And that requires a different approach to education. And by the way, it's an approach that is almost impossible to deliver in a standard offline, one professor to a certain number of students in vacuum type of model. You actually need to have a cross-contextual, cross-disciplinary approach to education. You have to have data that enables professors from different departments to be able to make connections for students in certain ways that they can transfer their information or their knowledge from one area to another. And you have to provide feedback to students on how they progress so that they're ready to tackle the real world. And so you asked the question about, is Minerva a university of the future? So to give you some perspectives, we're a very young university. We've only graduated our very first class this past May. But when you look at the outcomes for our students, they turned out to be the best outcome of any university graduates in the world. In fact, a number of our graduates receive the kinds of jobs and opportunities that were not available to any other college graduates. We had individuals that were getting types of opportunities that are 5 or 10 years out of a traditional undergraduate education. And why? Because when their employers were interviewing them, they asked them questions that they said no other undergraduate has ever been able to think through. They deployed the kinds of systematic thinking that they learned in the classroom to solve real-world problems. And that's the key to a university education. And our hope is that as Russia and as other countries think about the deployment of higher education technology, that it's not a technology-first approach, that it is an educational outcomes-first approach, and then think about how do you bring a Minerva or Minerva-like experience to students throughout the Russian country.
And how do you think do classical universities manage to do all these tasks?
Not alone. Classical universities are grounded in what they know, which is fundamentally a department-based academic approach. They have a lot of strengths. There's a lot of value in the traditional university. But universities need to partner to be able to get to that next level. And what's important to understand is that universities have different approaches, and that's good, that's important, that needs to be preserved. Otherwise, what's the difference between going to one university versus another? It would be the same thing. But what you want to do is you want to enable those universities to think differently about their curriculum. And if you just say, as is done all the time in my country, in the United States, every university I know of, every 10 years, puts a faculty committee together to rethink the curriculum. And every 10 years, that faculty committee delivers the exact same curriculum the university has been teaching before. No change whatsoever. They start with lofty ambitions, but by the time it gets implemented, nothing happens. And so if you leave it to an institution to try to incrementally change on its own, you're going to wind up in the same place where you start. But if you partner and you bring the best of what both parties can bring to the table, you really can leapfrog education.
Спасибо большое.
Thank you very much. Let's move on, and now I would like to pass it over to Mikhail Kotikov. Let me ask you, Mikhail, what is your vision of the changes in higher education under the influence of high technologies. How does the society change because of the new technologies? Mikhail, can you hear me well? Welcome everyone to the Gaidar Forum, and thank you very much for organizing this panel. We have spent quite a bit of time talking about digital transformation in education, in universities. There's a number of projects that we have under the National Education Program. We move along. Things that we just heard are very relevant to the world and to us in Russia. We see that the growth rate of technologies is very high, and we need to review our approach to learning, to higher education system. Over 10 years, many people in this audience have changed lines of their careers, and it's hard to forecast what is going to happen in the next 10 years. Therefore, making long-term educational programs is quite a difficult job. One can do that, but it's not likely that things would be exactly like you plan for them to be. We could ask our colleagues what they think about the period 10 years away in the future. We work with the higher education system, and we need a new toolkit. We see what people are asking for. People are asking for high level of personalization and customization of learning curricula. Traditional university programs are kind of conveyor type production. We want to learn to change the system, make it more customized, make it address specific needs of the day. We do count on digital technologies a lot. We want to use those technologies to do successful partnership work with the industry, with various corporations. The more skills and abilities a graduate gets, the better are his chances to get a good job in the future. To do this better, we organized a contest last year. We have selected a number of universities. We selected 5 universities and gave them the task of working on a new curricula for administration systems, for development of various flexible educational trajectories and development of digital skills. And we want to use those versatile modules at different universities in different programs. There's a number of schools, and I see representatives of some of them in this room that received this task. We had some very interesting proposals. Moscow Medical University, named after Sechenov, came up with some very interesting ideas. So those 5 universities are going to help us develop a digital curricula. Universities are going to change, and this process has already been underway for some time, and it's irreversible. We have selected another set of 5 universities that we will use as a venue for preparation and retraining of professionals in the light of new technologies. We have received about 40 applications. There were 3 universities, amongst them Tomsk and Uralsk University and Harris School of Economics, that came out as winners in both contests. So we are going to do quite a bit within this program. What universities are going to do to change how our society is changing, how our cities are changing. We have thought a lot about it. We had a lot of debates at different fora, at different venues, and we have some idea. We have set a task to develop science and education centers. We want to improve and reshape many campuses. Universities have a large impact on lives of the cities that they are located in. Without development of cities, uh, it's difficult to develop economy, and cities depend on the science organizations and universities that they are a home to. We need to do more than just support existing universities. We are facing a much more interesting challenge, and I'm sure that our universities have the potential. 50 universities in Russia are in the list of top world universities. 50% of them are outside of Moscow, and I'm quite happy about that. We are focusing on several top universities. We are talking with different teams. They are developing new agendas. That is the future of the Russian system of higher education that we want to support. Yesterday, the president said a very important thing. There's a pilot to improve a new model of education within which students will be able to change the direction of their education in the course of studies. This is not a new idea. We've been playing with this idea for quite some time, but yesterday we have been given a task to create such an opportunity for students to make it happen. I am sure that there will be several universities out there in Russia that would like to try that would like to participate in this pilot project. I will be happy if people here today continue to talk about it. Thank you. Mr. Kotikov, let me ask you a clarification question. As universities change and develop, the role of the government, the role of the ministry, is it going to change? Will you be doing more in the way of administration, in the way of directing them? What is your vision? Let me share one idea about how the university is going to act. I can tell you about my attitude. This retuning of the system, changing universities, changing the level of responsibility that a university has for the outcomes of the educational process requires more independence, a high level of autonomy. We are going to need to do several changes. We need to increase the level of focus on the outcomes of education. We keep an eye on what our graduates do. We need to make sure that university graduates get proper jobs, that they can really utilize the education which they get at universities, to make sure that people get what they're looking for. We need to work on that, and we need to hold people responsible for their organizations being effective in what they're doing.
Clear, thank you. Let's move on. Yaroslav Kuzmichnov, Director of the Higher School of Economics. You're both classical university using a lot of modern formats. What have you been able to achieve? Where you're moving? Question to you. What we're doing? Many things. We embarked on the path of mass online courses a long time ago. We participate on two platforms. That's a Coursera platform. Our school has just published course number 100 on Coursera, and we're quite big in Coursera. And number 3 in our national platform, which is called Open Education. And currently, we have prepared a good technology, which is quite inexpensive and is quite convenient to use to publish online courses. And and we're moving to MOOC 2.0 platform with artificial intelligence elements, self-evaluation elements for course participants. It also has a gaming and simulator elements in those courses, and well, we'll offer those opportunities to all authors of the courses. It's about 2.5 million people is the audience of the Higher School of Economics, and including our online courses, and 600,000 are from Russia. About 300,000 audience in the US, 300,000 in the European Union, more than 100,000 in Ukraine. This is evidence of the fact that the coverage of our courses is very good, and we're using new channels for the purpose. As a result, we have a lot of foreign students right now, and the quality of education is growing. It's 35% increase every year in the number of foreign students. That's been like this for the past 4 years. Now, these are offline students, but some of them come to us later after our online courses. This is a big thing for the Russian education if we want to achieve the objective set by the president, doubling the number of foreign students, improving our positions in international competition in education. This is the right way to go. But we're also leaders in terms of using online courses inside the university. We're using about 300 online courses in the university studies. Less than 1/4 is our online courses created by our university. We believe it's more efficient to use others' online courses. Well, you replace routine parts of the lecture with online courses, and then you add something more specific, something more detailed. If a student gets interested, you go in depth with physical lectures. We also implemented a mandatory course, which is data science, and this for everybody, including philologists and lawyers. This is a big work that we did together with Yandex, together with all sorts of researchers, and we're multidisciplinary university, of course. We have humanitarian, like design disciplines, we have science, etc. So data science is obligatory. The next element we want to implement is basics of programming, maybe some elements of artificial intelligence as a course. I believe this is also very important, because digital is not simply new opportunities, it's a new language, and university students must be able to understand this language, no matter what their major is, no matter whom they want to become. They want to be able to communicate in that digital world. What have we achieved as a result? A free choice of courses, individual training programs. About 10% of students right now build their own training schedule. As Mikhail has said, we're going to expand this and make it a standard thing for every student so that they can choose their own way in the university. We'll know about the main problems of master's training. Now, some students come with very strong prerequisites. Some have a weaker background once they join the master's program. As a result, overall quality of master's program going down because some people want one thing, other people want different thing, and setting up courses for 5 people only is not is not economical. But digital allows doing that. And another thing is having researchers conducting classes remotely. Currently, we have about 300 researchers participating in seminars online, lecturing online. By year 2030, we do think that we will be able to increase the number of colleagues who participate in research and educational program to 100% or the same number as the residents of our campuses. This is a great opportunity to improve the quality of learning in our regional universities. Well, the universities selected as partners in the program, digitalization program, and today we're going to meet with the directors of universities to set up an association of universities who will participate in the digital program. We will have this meeting and an open platform, online education. Also 10 members there will join in, and clearly this association, this is going to be the core of the association and is going to expand, adding regional universities. Well, an interesting thing is what the challenges are that can be met through digital technologies. This is the thing that's being discussed often. But normally within the scope of secondary school education. What about professional training, higher learning? I believe it's going to create 4 things. First, it's feedback. You can always be able to evaluate the quality of knowledge, the quality of learning for students, and which is good for everybody, for teachers, for students, and for administration. Number 2, overcoming the problems of shortage of resources, especially in provincial universities, improving the quality of libraries, information resources. The president said yesterday, and that's very important for us, a free internet for socially important resources. And clearly this is education and healthcare. This is step number 1, and we should continue on that. And well, the next step would be probably on behalf of the Russian state to purchase information resources and libraries and provide access to those as a public domain for Russian universities, no matter where they're located, in what region they're located. If a student is active, they would want to visit libraries rather than attending courses only. Number 3, improving the depth of knowledge and competence. Simulators, games, trainings, but they will become much less expensive than they are right now. But for this, we need implementing artificial intelligence, at least in its basic form. And number 4, as a result of all of this, overcoming problems in education. And I mean, in terms of academic performance. The underperformers feel they're outside the whole learning process, like the world is somewhere outside. These people, underperforming people, feel outside of that world. So the artificial intelligence, digital resources would help them get integrated into the rest of the world, making their trajectory of learning individual. What universities would be able to comply with these requirements? Well, for as long as they can improve the quality and increase the scope of their operation, they will be able to do that. So as a result, we expect we will have a shrinkage in the number of universities. And in that respect, well, the image that we see as our future is a core of universities which would ensure full involvement of students in education and in research. The number of teachers would increase because there would be remote teaching. Then franchise or network program. Our university now have as 35 educational partners in the region, in the regions, and we want to increase that to 150. And digital programs, well, this little cloud of influence of the university. We have introduced the first complete online master's program in the English language in Coursera. We have already 150 people enrolled there, and the profitability of university by 2013 to these two network programs and is going to be 25 to 35% from the traditional sources of revenue. Thank you. I have one thing to add to what's been said. Well, you talked about digital libraries. Well, in the Science National Project this year, we're going to provide access to international basis of quotations and most of the articles. So a major part of that objective, mainly in the area of the research, is being addressed already by the ministry. We will expand on that, of course, because this national subscription, all our biggest universities are basic participants, anchor participants. They would provide access to these resources to the students and partner organizations. Mikhail, what's important here is, well, for engineers, the libraries of elements are extremely important for them. That's also a big issue that has to be addressed. Thank you. Let's move on. I would like now to give the floor to Dmitry Peskov, asking him what are the challenges facing the universities in terms of technology, and can universities cope with these challenges? Thank you very much. Good morning, colleagues. Well, the challenges of which day? Over the past 3 years, we've covered a lot of ground. We've caught up with what we were lagging behind. About 10 years, we were about 10 years behind. It's about now 70% of the challenges that we had in the foresight of future education in 2010. You all know about it, right? And there's the last item was about free access to internet on that program. It was planned to be provided by 2020, but we have it right now. But in 2010 and the decade that followed, that is now over. And so talking about digitalization as a goal, it's too late. Excuse me, but that was the agenda that was relevant the past 20 years. 2020 is going to have a different agenda. Like what Ben talked about, and I agree with what he said, that we should be moving much farther. Digital agenda, technological agenda is not enough. So what's the challenge, in my view? Number one, there are certain attributes of the world, and the education should comply with those attributes of the world. And it's quite easy to explain. We are moving into an epoch of great turbulence. That's going to be turbulent years, 2020s. The previous standards, agreements, and rules do not work any longer. On the other hand, we're entering an epoch of technological predeterminants. I'm professionally dealing with the future, and I don't agree with the colleagues. My predictions are often right. So in terms of technology, 2020s have been predetermined. We are sure what we are going to see. There's going to be a radical change in industry. We will be moving to electrical, pilotless sharing transport, etc., etc. We know what's going to happen, and all of that is going to create a situation where by 2035 we can forecast more or less what's going to happen until that period of time, because predictions will be more economic ones rather than technological ones. We don't know how things are going to be implemented, but we know what is going to be implemented because we have pilots already. So, and we can forecast the policy of the new government. You take the approach of the tax minister in terms of methodology of the past 10 years and apply that to other industries. Roughly, it's going to follow the same logic. I like actually their approach. Now, what are the characteristics of the world? Three basic ones. They're quite straightforward. Digitalization will stay, but the question is, well, we're not interested in digital. We are more interested in data. And key there is what is the quality of the data you're getting. Digitalization of simpler processes in the university, it's a history of the past. The first monograph about the digital university I read in early 2000s. That was the monograph from the rector of Vladivostok University. That was a great paper, but that happened 15 years ago, implemented already, that Vladivostok University. Well, our universities will need an additional 3 to 5 years to reach what they had achieved 15 years ago. They had the greatest success in that. But so the quality of data, how deep the data runs is important. Do you form educational trajectory of the person using data or not? That's number one. The second part of the story is what is called globalization, or in the language of politologists is called glocality. Are you represented on the global map of the world? Or do you have unique things you can offer in that landscape? This is like mass uniqueness for the weakest of the weakest, for the regional of the regional university, in the worst meaning of the word. They have an opportunity to find a place on the world map using their unique opportunities and evaluate themselves based on the benchmarking that you take from the work. That's number two. And number three, even more important, it's key. The way you're represented in the network. When we say network, well, it's being used so often. But and we keep talking about networking, but it's not fully implemented in this country. Last year, we started building a network model. Last year, the number of members of the program, a year and a half, of 130,000 people. We haven't got much resources that, as opposed to individual university. This means that the model can be built in a different fashion. What does it mean to be a network university? It means that you build oneself as a network. You know how many nodes you've got, who represents those nodes, what are the interactions between the nodes, what happens within your network, what are the interactions between the nodes of the network, what the value being created by the network, what is the funnel people use to get into your network, what is your retention rate in that network. That's key characteristic. How many people come in and how many people go out of your network. What is the density of human capital in your network? How you measure it? What is the value of the faculty? All of these things were well described in the networking theory. We forgot about that as a country, and we're not using it in our country. But economic growth today in the world is not possible without understanding networking effects that's built on it. For the world, it's evident. If 10 years in Silicon Valley, you would ask for investment for an educational project, go to Silicon Valley. Well, the question would be, what is your growth based on the Metcalfe laws? And all networking platforms that have economic dominance of the world right now are built on that logic. How much value are going to create in your network? Yeah, please don't interrupt until the speaker completes his statement. Well, the Metcalfe law, it's quadratic growth. If you start working with the communities in a networking matter, you go into the Reed law and you can go get exponential growth. These are quite straightforward laws, Metcalfe and Fried, and they're the foundation of today's world. The way key economic things evolve. And we, in this country, we tend to forget about these laws, but we should get back to them. So locality, network connector, and digitalization, in a sense that is managing on the basis of data. These are the three key characteristics. Now, a story about the university. I think they're going to be distinguished between the ones who will create economic effect and the ones that have a mission. In long-term planning, the ones would be victorious, not the ones that create economic result, but the ones that have a mission. Mission is something that gives the university an opportunity to overcome economic constraints. It's not a mission that would be created by a consulting company for you. No, a real mission. Because a mission is something that would attract people to your network from outside, involve these people and build the model that you need to build.
Next key parameter is the network density. I'm talking about the work we do with teams. Yesterday, the president has set 3 key tasks for the development of the education system. And we have not yet mentioned one of them. Free access to the web would open up new opportunities to get a new profession. Digital economy project allows everyone, every university student to get a second profession. There is no technology constraint there. What I do not understand now is that a lot of people focus on small things, but they do not address the main task. We would expect to have a much more serious approach to the project. We need not 4, not 10 digital universities. We need one comprehensive digital university that will cover the entire country and that will be available to all and everyone. That is a different level of a task under the digital economy project. Yet another point that the president mentioned. People have the right to take risks. Every university should be able to safely create venture funds and invest financially in students and professors' projects. I encourage presidents of universities to think about it and follow this line of work. We want to play with it. We want to try to make it work. And by summertime, we want to have appropriate laws that would allow this to happen. That is yet another area. Access, second profession, and risk-taking. Network density, working with teams, educational trajectories are important. We care not only about individual educational learning trajectories, but also about the collective trajectories. How many teams we are going to have graduating from universities network? How many teams are going to be out there working for the economy, creating new products? There's a simple technology that we have not been using yet, but it is out there. We need to change the way we form students' groups in the first year of studies in the university. Today, this is happening through people who do not view this as a specific task at all. There are clerics in the universities that will just assign students to certain groups. They're not using any specific criteria. We know that the future of a student, his or her ability to work successfully greatly depends on the friendships and on the networks that students make when they study in a university. We need to create teams of students. Based on the outcomes of the entrance examinations, we need to look at the first-year students' skills and knowledge level and put them together in groups. We need to follow up on those groups. We need to support them, and we need to create partnerships of students in every university. If we don't know how to do that, let's find a person in another university who can do it for you. There is technology that can support this. The mechanisms are out there. The technologies are out there. Just use them. We have sets of recommendations on putting together teams of students. Let's share this knowledge, this experience. Let's use other people's knowledge. Let's use the best practices and advice that is available to all of us. Thank you. Thank you. A round of applause, indeed. Let's move on. I have a question for Mr. Amaya of English First. You started as a face-to-face model program of language studies. Have you turned into a full-fledged university? And the second question is, what are the technologies that impact your work more than others?
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? EF Education first started out as an immersion business, and so it's a study abroad. So if you want to learn English, we'll ship you to New York or to London, and you spend 6 weeks or 6 months there. And that changing context is very powerful. Actually, you don't just learn languages, but you come quite changed. It's a transformative experience. And that has always been the DNA of the company. The EF has 15 programs, and including a business school. It's called Hult University. And Hult is the same thing. You get an MBA by signing up in Boston, and then you spend 1 quarter in Shanghai, 1 quarter in London or Dubai or one of the 6 campuses that we have. And so it's a very immersive, transformative experience. And when we began to use technology, and it was 20 years ago that we started the first online school, the way we thought about it was that maybe one day we'll be able to use technology to bring New York to you if you are one of those who cannot afford to go to New York because of money or time or whatever. And I think that technology has come a long way with AI, AR, VR, and so on that allows us to create richer and richer context so that we can actually bring New York to you. But over the years, my thinking has shifted a little bit on that, and for 2 reasons. One is when you do pure online, one of the things that you realize is that it's really hard to change human behavior. So for you to be able to study some language online, pure online, you need a lot of self-discipline. And it's a small part of the population that has that. And it's not the fault of the population, it's just that the experience lacks that context. And so I would like to give you an example of how my thinking has shifted. And I think that instead of creating a context, even if you had a virtual New York, you still have to stop cooking, then you go to the virtual New York, and then you do your thing, and then you come back out. So can we, instead of doing that, can we bring a little bit of English into your life, right? And so let me give you an example of that. And before I do that, one of the things that I wanted to say is that, resonating with what Ben just said, that a lot of efforts to use technology in learning make the mistake of starting from technology and then go look for a problem to solve. And that's true of AI, AR, VR, CD-ROMs, internet, radio, TV. They think that it's transformative, and they take a piece of tech, and then they go look for a problem. And one of the main problems that I see happening when people approach the use of technology in education like this is that they make the mistake of, I think you saw the chart, approaching learning as something that happens only in the head. It's a cognitive process and not an emotional one. And the context, or what our colleagues were talking about, the network and having the social environment is very, very important. And so I want to give you an example that is simple because it's with kids, 4- and 5-year-old kids, but that you should think about how that applies to adults too, because I think that even though we're grown up, we're the same way, right? So let me tell you a little bit about a project that we did with 4- and 5-year-old kids in China. We have 300,000 students going to our programs in China. These are schools. And one of the things that happens is that 4-, 5-, 6-year-olds, they come to our school for 90 minutes. There are 15 students in the class, so if you divide 90 minutes by 15, it's 66 minutes per student that they get some personal attention. And then they go home and they spend 1,100 minutes with 0 English in their lives. So it's just not enough for you to learn. So the thinking was, can we bring a little bit of English into their lives in a way that is relevant, that is meaningful, hopefully fun? And so it was a TPO thing, a time, place, and occasion. Can we find the right time, place, and occasion to insert some English? So the idea is very simple. Suppose that it's 7 p.m. and mom told us that it's time to brush your teeth. Then why don't we...
It's time to brush your teeth.
play a little
Get
song.
your toothbrush ready. Here we go.
Brush your teeth.
It's a little bit of
up
English.
and down. Brush
They have
your
zero
teeth
English at
round
home.
and round. Brush your teeth from left to right. Brush your teeth in the morning and night.
That's it. Just a couple of minutes of English, right? So suppose that's a little later. It's time for you to go to bed. Why don't we tell you a story?
I
Right?
want to listen to my
grab the
favorite
book,
dinosaur story.
Go to bed. And
Let's get in bed and together we'll listen to How Do Dinosaurs Say Good Night?
How does a dinosaur say good night when Papa comes in to turn off the light?
And because it was for 4 or 5-year-olds, we thought that because they don't have phones, many of them don't have tablets, we thought that it'd be good to have a toy, right? So this is a toy with a mic and speaker, and it can detect, oh, let's play a game. And so you can take a card. Sorry if you can't see it, but he's talking a little bit. You can take a little card and go. Stop talking, so that the kid can carry it around also. But back to this thing of starting from the learning sciences first and not from the tech. One of the things that we discovered is that if the parent is not involved, the kid couldn't care less about the tech. And so for us, it became very, very apparent that we needed to involve parents, we needed to involve teachers, and we needed to involve the kids. And so I'm gonna, if I have time, I will show you a short video of families trying to use this idea in Shanghai. You're gonna see 3 types of families. One, the parents are very involved. The second one, the parents are involved only at night. And the third one, parents are away. They're the kids with grandpa, grandma. And you will witness the difference that involvement from parents have on the outcomes. Whoops. Can you click on it so that it plays? So this family is very involved only at night and only weekends. So can you raise the volume a little? Mom speaks a little bit of English, so this kid loves it. He's just totally engaged. It's just because the parents are together, right? This kid is with grandpa right there, and grandma is videotaping, and he's like, what? What am I supposed to do? Is this meaningless? Because grandpa, grandma also don't get involved. And then dad comes home, and they go brush their teeth. Now he's engaged.
好，有没有尝试那种色？啊，我这以为的尝好尝。
This one is the parents are away. You got the dinosaur book. The dinosaur story is playing, and he couldn't care less. So you see, and then I'm going to stop here in the interest of time. But so the tech. It's interesting. We love this. It's a smart speaker. We do speech assessment. If you say car and you say gar, no, not gar, car. And so there's AI, there's Internet of Things. It's connected. It's always with the kid and so on. But the tech is a very small part of it. What we discovered actually was that it is more difficult to change the behavior of the parent so that the parent participates than to change the behavior of the kid. And so when you think about using technology in education, you have to start from the learning sciences and then go look for the technology. And when you apply technology, you have to look at as our colleague was saying, the network. effect that having peers and so on has on the outcomes that you can expect. Thank you, Papa.
Спасибо большое.
Thank you very much. In the remaining part, and we have about 20 minutes, I would like to talk about the next decade. We are now in the 20s. The 20s are here. What is going to be the main model of learning in the next 10 years? I think the university model that will not be afraid to use new approaches, using the past experience as well, will win. Universities have the potential of their professors. There are certain traditions, there are models, and the challenge that universities are facing is all about taking learning away from the traditional processes. Universities should open up to new technologies, to new faculty, to new curricula. Not all of the new curricula would be using the old stuff as a foundation. There's got to be a new attitude to the technologies that become available. Many universities walk away from them because they do not look attractive. They're too different from what they're used to. That's what is going to make universities successful. That's the trick. Thank you. Mr. Amaya, I have a question for you. The video that you have shown us, it's about successful families. Technologies will make education and learning more available in a broad sense, or is it going to remain available only to a small number of people?
I think that technology is going to be everywhere. There's no question about that. The cost is going down by a half every 18 months. Power goes up. And so I think that technology is going to be an inevitable part of everybody's lives. Now, I think that for adults, what you can do is you think about the kid, the parent, and the teacher. You replace that with yourself or staff, the manager, and the trainer. And what we need to do is make sure that the training, as we heard before, is relevant for you, that it's meaningful, that it's appropriate for the context. And so it is bringing a lot of that learning to a context that makes it make sense. And I think that Internet of Things, 5G, AI, VR, AR, it'll all make it possible. But you have to take into account the emotional side of learning, not just, okay, let's put this information online and assume that you're going to learn. You will not learn. You have to take care of the affective, the emotional side of learning, which it is like an iceberg. It is much bigger than your ability. If you marry somebody who speaks French, you're much more likely to learn French than because of your mental abilities to learn French.
Спасибо. Следующий вопрос Дмитрию Пескову. Кто будет основным игроком на рынке университетского образования?
Next question for Dmitry Peskov. Who will be the main players in the education market, universities or somebody else?
Well, the university education market will continue to be populated by universities, but the very educational market, we call them higher education, additional education, would be much narrower for universities. They're not going to be proactive because the problem is costs. If you're a university, you have to spend 80% of your time to manage your infrastructure. Well, depending, of course, of your position. But you have reporting, you have buildings, you have licenses, you have a regulator. You have to deal with all those things, no matter what your vision is. it's additional burden. Well, when people ask me, what is higher than the minister? Well, bureaucratic logic is higher than the minister. In that sense, universities have a problem. They are brownfield. They have to carry the past with them. Well, it's becoming a burden, a liability, the assets that they are called right now. So in our 2035 program, we said, A, we're not going to have any material assets within our university, and we're not going to keep our own teaching staff. We decided against that as a principle. As a result, for regional universities, we become partners, not competitors. And there are going to be very many new models, like Minerva, 2035. If we're going to have 10 or 15 or more projects like this, they would take a lot of the market. And actually, the big players are not yet in the educational market. When I say big players, it is the ones who are creating super applications. Big financial markets players with a lot of money. And without talking about educational revolution, the market is exploding, etc. Well, people would tell me, well, you've invented this venture fund with 7 billion rubles and you're going to kill the market. No, guys, 7 billion rubles is very little money for this market. If big players come in, maybe Sberbank, who can invest 200 billion in non-financial assets every year, Yandex or Tinkoff or Mail.ru, and they started doing education in earnest, not like they're doing right now, then, excuse me, they can get 70% of the market in 2 or 3 years. Dmitry, are they not going to come? What do you think? Yes, they will. Because the market is tasty. You know, in the 20s, everybody will have to go through additional training. If you want to stay valuable on the labor market, you have to get training. That was from the audience, not to be heard. Like all colleagues from universities who passed certification. Well, Dmitry, you're not the proper university. My question to Ben, what's going to happen to universities in the coming 10 years?
I think that's up to universities. I think that there is really two paths that they can go on. One path is to reform. It's to come up to speed with what the potential is for a new kind of education and add a new level of value to society to effectively firm the position of universities within society as the places that people need to go in order to be effective participants in a modern world. The alternative is that universities do what they've been doing. And they can hide behind technology. They can say, oh, look, you know, we do this, we do that. But effectively, they're delivering the same kind of education. And that will generate a dangerous time for not just higher education, but the world. The reality is the world needs effective institutions of higher education. But when you go and talk to people more broadly, and you have an honest conversation about the value of universities, the responses are not good. When I started Minerva 9 years ago, I started talking to other people about my plans, what I was looking to do. And I always started talking about the curriculum, the outcomes, the education. And I said, oh yes, I'm going to build a new university that'll demonstrate to the world that universities can really teach. And I was talking to graduates of all the Ivy League universities, of Stanford, of Berkeley, and almost every single one of them looked at me with a puzzled look on their face. And they said, what are you talking about? Everyone knows you don't learn anything at university. The point of a university isn't to learn anything, it's to meet people and have fun. And these are graduates of the best universities in the world. And that is not sustainable. It's not sustainable because it's a $2 trillion US dollar sector globally. And society will not continue to invest $2 trillion, whether it's the taxpayer, the government, a philanthropist, a consumer. They will simply not continue to pay that kind of money to support a sector that's now popularly known as a thing you either have to do or that is just fun to do. It doesn't work. And so unless universities reform, they will delegitimize themselves.
Спасибо большое. И в завершение...
Thank you very much. Now I have a very quick question to all participants, because it's almost, we're starting another decade. What's going to be the most important event in higher education in the coming 10 years? Well, you can think 3 minutes or so, and quick answer, please, in one sentence. What would be your answer? Ben, can you start?
Be a bankruptcy and a closure of a university that no one thought could ever go bankrupt.
Now, a good result would be no more diplomas and standards. I think what we are going to expect for sure is a change from the classical perception of a university. That's what we've been talking about an hour and 1.5 hours. And the first that are going to change are going to get the best results. Does not mean that the first results from the first status would be the best results, but they will have that right to make a mistake that we talked about today. They will have time to improve, though, unless there is openness about student centricity, whether it's online or offline students. Well, universities should do a maximum to make sure the people who come to them get satisfaction from the process, both in terms of content and, well, in terms of fun and in terms of teamwork, etc. This is practice. These examples are going to come soon. Very interesting to follow what's going to happen. Yaroslav, I think in the world, the key change would be the change in secondary school, because it is there, secondary school, where, well, elementary, maybe secondary, we have a big problem in secondary. It is there that the first results we will feel of the digital revolution. There will be many who will not be able to deal with the program, and some students at 7th, 8th, 9th year, that they will be able to find their track. It's not higher education, yeah, that's secondary school, and that's going to be, well, like that. As for Russia, I think that in Russia, a key change, in addition to what I mentioned already, is that we'll have no more secondary vocational training. We should follow the trends available in the world. It's called applied bachelor's degree or learning. That would be much improved status and the quality of, well, hands-on work.
Question, can you repeat it for me?
What will be the most significant change in...
Наиболее существенные
So I
Как я уже
behavior is very hard. People die actually instead of changing their behavior, like stop smoking or drinking or eat better and so on. And so in some ways they prefer to die than to change their behavior. And to change institutional behavior, as Dimitri was saying, is exponentially harder. And so I think that the problem is that many institutions will not be able to do what Ben was talking about, which is to reform, and they will be disrupted instead of reforming themselves, instead of changing their behaviors. And I think that that could be a dramatic shift in the educational space over the next 10 years.
Спасибо большое, коллеги. Мы
Thank you very much, colleagues. That brings our session to an end. Let's give our participants a round of applause. It's been very interesting. Thank you so much.